Hello everyone, welcome back to another figure comparison. My name is Matthew and today we're doing a figure comparison regarding the Titan Evolution Godzilla rubber skin suit and the figure itself versus their basically original counterparts. Now, I threw him in there because he's got to have something to compare to, so we basically have four figures here. Yes, this does count as a figure because Playmates does advertise this as a two-in-one not premium, definitely nowhere premium, but definitely just like a deluxe set almost. Of course, um, the whole gimmick of it being that you're supposed to take this guy's chest and peel it off and it reveals him inside. But today I want to go over the figures in specific and how they compare to each other. And usually I do a versus, but no, we're just going to do like a casual comparison between all the categories and really just showcase how different these things are from each other. So let's go ahead. And actually, first we're going to start with the pre-evolution Godzilla, since this is going to be the more quicker one of the two. So let's start with the pre-evolved Godzillas. And right out of the gate, you can honestly kind of see how different these two really are from each other. On one hand, you have this one, which is more of a standard action figure, and this one, which is just merely a skin to hold the standard figure inside of it. And that being said, the paint job is similar, but at the same time vastly different. First, let's just talk about the face. The face on the Titan Evolution Godzilla, pre-evolved at least, is sporting obviously the standard blue eyes, but there's no pupil and it's just purely blue in there. And instead of the whole jaw being painted, it's just the tongue with no additional painting towards the teeth. Meanwhile, the action figure, or the 6-inch basic figure, sports the pupil and a standard blue painted eye, and actually has the painted teeth with the painted gums and tongue. So as far as like that's concerned, that's basically where you fall. As far as like the overall sculpt, it's practically the same. I mean, as far as like detailing goes, this guy's in a much more neutral position with his arms out to the side, kind of like how he is, except he doesn't have his legs like pre-posed. It's just kind of standard legs, although they had to beef up his arm size in order to get anywhere. To get the gimmick to work, because I don't think you can just take this, turn it to rubber, and then expect it to work. No, no, no. But what's kind of weird is that as far as like detail goes, they're actually kind of even, because there's not that much areas where the detail is all that smoothened out. Even though the whole figure is kind of smooth, you can kind of see like in areas right here where it is smoothened out, but everywhere else is very, very detailed for being such a big giant rubber piece. I mean, I shouldn't be too surprised. The rubbery pieces on the 6-inch basic figures are kind of the most detailed part of them. But another comparison is you can actually kind of see the spines and how they're molded. These ones are molded more towards like getting it more chunky down and kind of molded together. Almost, it looks more like the 2014 design, honestly, while this one looks more like, well, obviously KOT and onward. Another thing you can also notice is the lack of claw paint on this one, since this one does not have any claw paint on either the hands or legs, while this one obviously has the claw paint on the arms and legs, or the claws on the hands and feet. I should probably want to clarify. But also something that this one lacks is the battle damage, although, okay, with the rubber skin, the door opening up, it's kind of weird how Playmates made two of the same incarnation of Godzilla and gave them both like some sort of way to open up the chest. One being battle damage, which just to demonstrate, there you go, and there you go. So, what's with Playmates' habit of getting this guy to open up his chest? So, obviously, before anyone asks, no, this rubber is not the same as this rubber. It doesn't even look the same. So, I know that was just probably something that someone out there is probably going to be wondering. No. But closing it back up, you can also definitely just tell, like, as far as the quality difference in the paint itself, This one, because it's rubber, is more prone to paint chippage, as you can see right there. And some other bits like right there and there. And right here, a little scab. And this was like, you can go back to my unboxing video. It was not, get back in there. Kind of wish there was like Velcro or something that could like zip that open, zip that closed. Um, it was like this straight out of the box, so I didn't do anything. I grabbed it on the shelf and went home. But to talk about this one, his paint is obviously a little bit more concealed and actually goes, well, let's actually talk about the tail. The tail is a bit different on both figures. With this one, it's a lot more detailed and a lot more compact because it's folded upward and going at an angle. Well, this one is going straight down but kind of curls upward, and it's not like a different position. In fact, there's no paint on it, but also it only features the single row of fins, and all the other rows of fins have basically been kind of smoothened out, which only leads to one conclusion. This tail is very reminiscent of the original Heat Ray Godzilla from 2020. And I say 2020 because the figures were released in 2020, not 2021. That being said, see how it kind of curls off to the side and kind of goes limp? Just like how this one did? I honestly kind of have a theory. I know, my name is Matthew. I'm not taking over game theory, sorry. But you can kind of tell that because of the way this tail is positioned and the way this one is positioned and how paint wise he kind of matches more up with him because his fins are not translucent and this guy does not have any paint on his spines, only leads me to believe that at one point this guy had a flattened out tail like this one did, and during the production, because both these guys were produced at the same time, they molded it with the longer tail instead of the more flapped out tail in order to accommodate the design. But then when they were like, oh wait, we can't release two figures that look almost near identical like that, so they made a last minute decision to flip up his tail. That, or I'm just looking into completely different creative licenses. So that pretty much wraps up the sculpt and paint. To pretty much summarize, we're looking at the detail is kind of consistent between the two, but there are some sculpt differences as far as the neutral position goes. The top torsos are practically the same, but the spines are much more 2014-esque because they're all clumped and morphed together, and the legs are in different positions. That and the tails are also in different positions, mainly to, one, accommodate it, or two, to validate my wild theory. And as for the paint, they pretty much feature identical paint applications, except he does not have the claw paint and the paint on the tails, and he does not have just the basic tongue paint and actually has a pupil. But it's also kind of ironic, even though he lost some paints from him, he also lost paint from his original release, that being the original Heat Ray where he had the dry brushing on the sides. Next, to cover posability, and I just gotta pretty much simplify this. He features a hinged jaw, swivels at the arms, swivels at the legs, swivels at the feet, and a ball joint at the tail. This guy has no posability on his own. However, he has a similar range of movement, minus the jaw, when you actually go ahead and put the figure inside. And as far as accessories go, this is the accessory for him, which you can just plug right into the beam. I'm actually just viewing the camera while I do so. Then that's not going to be the greatest. And you go like that. No, the beam is not compatible with him because one, he's made rubber, and two, his jaw cannot shut. And also, he comes with the battle damage, stuff that he does not come with, but he technically comes with another figure, so maybe more bang for your buck on that part. But that pretty much wraps it up for the comparison between these two. Since there's quite a bit of differences, but it's much more easier to talk about this than the other one, because let's be honest, the evolved Godzillas are going to be really similar. Okay, so now that we've got the pre-evolved Godzillas out of the way, let's make room for the stars you've been waiting for. The Titan Evolution Godzilla figure, not the rubber skin figure, but the plastic figure, and the evolved Godzilla with Heat Ray. Now, off the bat, you can automatically see that there's a huge difference. Well, actually, some differences, but they look almost the same. But there are a lot of differences, but we're going to primarily be focusing on here. But first, let's get actually the height down in terms of like the posture and the body position. This is obviously a bit taller than this, which is weird because he comes technically in the bigger figure. That's basically taller than any of them. But that being said, he's the shortest because of his posture. He, as far as like the leg position goes, we'll talk about it in a bit. He's standing kind of in a walking pose, with one leg being bent backwards and a bit on its not its hind, but kind of its toes, and this one kind of walking forward, and has its one arm kind of tucked in, the other arm kind of leading out, almost as if it's about to grab something, and it's a bit more upright. This one has its legs severely like slouched, almost like he's about to be sit, and is much more hunched over. And the arms are a bit more limp. So he's obviously a lot less, well, what's the big term? Obviously his posture's not as good, but let's just talk about the sculpt and paint. So for the sculpt and paint on the head's almost the exact same. Of course, it's going to be a bit bigger on this one than it is this one, but they're going to be almost the same. What's a big glaring, similarity is the eyes. This one obviously is a bit more downward, this one's a bit more to the front, and from what I've seen, has better quality control on this one than this one, because I mean, this was inside of a rubber suit. Not really going to be caring about that much. But the inside of the mouths are rather identical with the same kind of colored tongue. Although I might be going crazy, but no, they're the same. We have like the same kind of spray, olive green on the side, where the main plastic is kind of like bluish green. But what the main difference is the top of the spines. Here, they're a lot more red and match the translucent pink fins, versus here where they're a bit more orange and don't really match it. Again, I don't really have a preference, but I definitely do think as far as like transitioning goes, this works a lot better. I know I commented saying like this, it doesn't really bug me as much as I thought it would, but having both of them next to each other, there's a clear difference. Much like we discussed earlier, another big difference is the arms. Moving his arm up, you can kind of see that they're in a vastly different pose. This one is just kind of more neutral with his hands like that, almost as if he's about to grab something. Although I think that's what I said about him, so I guess that really doesn't work. Well, it looks like he's actually grabbing something. This one looks like he's just about to reach out and grab something. But not only is it pose, but it's also the fact that this features the elbow spike, a concept version of the elbow spike, because the elbow spike is actually supposed to be on his forearm, not the upper arm. Well, this one doesn't have that at all. In fact, it's ultimately just smoothened out over, or like a line of scales that where it would be. So obviously, just to make it fit. Although I feel like they should have just done what the Titan Tech one did and like open it up and then like, well, it should remain closed, and then when you have it out, you could open it up. That would have been so much cooler. Blend the two ideas together, playmates. Adding on to the sides of the bodies, although you may not realize it at first, this figure has much more defined detail than this one. And I say much more defined because while both of them do feature the same detail, it's more defined on this version and feels a lot better if you like take your finger and rub it against it. I feel more on this side than I do this side. But what's also a kind of a more similarity is the way that they're painted on their underbellies, and it features that same kind of like olive green. It's on the arms on the Titan Evolution version, but not the original. Although it is worth noting that both sets have their claws painted. Taking a look at the legs, again, like the arms, different postures, same paint and detail. Pretty much speaking, this has slight, more defined details on the sides. And also, there's a bit of an olive spray right in the between the legs on the inside, but the paint on the claws is the exact same. And even though, again, the pose is not the same, it's still, pretty much identical from the two releases. Although, again, this is much more defined and actually feels bumpy compared to this, which does feel bumpy, but not as much, at least to me. Next, we're going to talk about the spines, which there's really not much difference here. In fact, I think ultimately they just took the spines from this figure and put on this one, or they did it the opposite way. We'll never really know because both of these figures were in production at the same time. And what's also really worth noting is that maybe... No, I'm going crazy. I thought this one was a bit more opaque than this one. And now my mind's gone crazy. I'm going to stop this section. And to wrap up the sculpt and paint section, we're going to take a look at the tail, which is quite possibly the biggest difference on this figure. Or these figures, pardon me. The Titan Evolution, much like its rubber suit counterpart, only has one row of dorsal fins and then leads off to the little tail tip that you find on Godzilla Evolved's design, like the extra thagomizers, like the extra fins. On this one, just to recap, it's just one single row, and then you have like these fins that are meant to represent what you find on the screen, but they're all painted red. And it also lacks the additional rows of spines that it's supposed to have, and it's not as fanned out as it is on the actual design. This one is a bit more closer towards the actual design, obviously being more of an action figure, not just a fun gimmicky figure, and actually has all the spines, and plus has a much more unique tail pose. This one has a bit of a curve, however, it's so mild, you might as well just not even have it. This one actually has it so it's more reminiscent of the Heat Ray Godzilla from 2020, and then you have where it's off base, and then it kind of swoops out to one side and then comes back around the other. Although I will say again, the coloring is a lot better on this one and matches the spines more on this compared to this, where it's kind of a much more harsher transition. Because again, I know I said I didn't really care, but it just looks more like sand. It looks like I chunked this thing against the ground and just started going to town on this thing. But I will say the thagomizers are done a lot much more better on this one than they are this one. So to summarize the sculpt and paint, it's essentially the same paint-ish, minus the spines that are not translucent, but it's also quite different as far as the poses. He's in a bit of a more leaned back position, or slouched. He's a bit more upright and ready for battle. So that's essentially what's going on here. Also, this one's a bit more simplified. And as far as posability goes, both figures... Actually, yeah, we'll just talk about both figures because they're quite identical. Both figures feature an articulated hinged jaw that allows them to open up that far, down about that far. No swivels at the head, although it looks like this one's gonna turn. Don't you see that seam line? That's gonna right off. This one features a basic rotation at the arm, which allows it to go pretty much all the way around, and so does this one. But what makes this one different is that this one features a hinge, so you can actually kind of fan Godzilla out to the side like that, almost like he's about to do a T-pose, which is funny because I feel like if you're going to make a smaller Godzilla, this one should have had this sort of posability, regardless if it was in a suit or not. Both Godzillas feature articulated legs, so for this one you can kind of move up about that far, backwards about that far, and this one you can rotate forwards about that far, backwards about that far, and both of them feature articulated ankles, which you can practically rotate them all the way around. So pretty much all good there. And both of them feature ball joints at the base of the tail where you actually plug it in, except, of course, this one can rotate. No other joints, no bendy wire. But what's funny about this one is that it actually comes disattached inside of the suit, and there's actually a string. So don't try and break the string. I would honestly not recommend it. I don't even know what's attached. Oh, there it is. Okay, so yeah, just don't break the string. I'm kind of worried if I tug it too hard, then I'm going to end up snapping this thing right in two. So it's a bit, I mean, it kind of comes on pretty easily. So there you go. It's fine if it's loose in there. So just overall, that's basically what articulation is. There's no difference aside from that hinge. And to wrap this whole section up, we're going to talk about accessories, which there's only one accessory for him, and that's obviously the heat ray, which you plug in through a peg at the top of the mouth, and it's like that. No, the beam does not work in this one because there is no hole in the sculpt to accommodate that beam, which I think really sucks because you had the mold and you had this figure which you were co-producing at the same time. Could have had that beam. I really think you could have. And so overall, this is basically the whole thing. When you really compare them, there's a lot of differences and a lot of similarities between the two. Sorry about that background noise. My dogs just got into a fight, but essentially these figures are all different in some way, shape, or form. Even these two, which at first glance look incredibly similar, are in fact different. And honestly, it's really up to you which one you want to buy. In fact, if you want to get this thing for only $15 at Target, Walmart, or Amazon, or Toys R Us if your country still has it, go right ahead. It's 2 figures in one package, and you get one of the most funniest, craziest, and weirdest Godzilla toys of all time. That, or you can spend $20 on these two. They don't come together, but $20 on these 2 figures, $10 each, and you'll walk away with some pretty cool accessories and battle damage for him. But with that being said, that's all I have to say. If you guys liked it, definitely subscribe to the channel. Believe in Jesus, accept him as Lord and Savior today, spread the gospel. Now, see you guys in the next video. Peace, everyone. God bless.